So we can go ahead and get started. Teresa, you can pause me or stop me at any point for clarification, or if anybody has questions, you can briefly unmute yourself if Teresa says that's okay to chime in with any questions. We'll also save some time for Q&A at the end. Okay, well, I'm here today to talk about hypophonia, which relates to your voice in Parkinson's disease. My name's Wes. I'm a speech therapist at Providence St. Vincent Hospital. I do outpatient rehabilitation here. I work a lot with individuals with Parkinson's disease, helping them with voice and swallowing. I also take turns leading one of our loud crowd groups, which is a group format therapy for people who've already gone through the initial individual therapy program. So let's see if I can find the controls. Okay. On today's agenda, we'll talk a little bit about what is hypophonia, why it happens, what we can do about it, and some specifics of the Speak Out program and also the Loud Crowd program. And like I said, a little question and answer at the end. Okay, so what is hypophonia? Essentially, hypo meaning low or reduced, phonia meaning speech. So hypophonia means soft speech or a weak voice. And this is a really common condition in Parkinson's. It's one of the most characteristic symptoms of the disease. So prevalence, in general, Parkinson's affects about 1 in 100 adults over the age of 60. And within that group of people with Parkinson's, about 90% of people can expect to, at some point, develop a weaker voice that can lead to difficulty with speech and swallowing. So the impact of this is pretty clear, I think. Difficulty communicating in lots of different situations, from being able to tell a story or a joke, or have a phone conversation, or even tell someone you love them. It can have a really big impact on your quality of life if you're not able to use that strong voice when you need it and say things that are important to you. This is also associated with an increased risk of choking, because when we're talking about the vocal cords, when you produce voice, your vocal cords get involved and they can get that movement becomes a little weaker in Parkinson's. Vocal cords are also involved in protecting your airway when you swallow. So if you're struggling with a weak voice, you might be a little more prone to things going down the wrong way. But the good news is therapy can help address these issues. Before we talk about therapy, let's talk about why these things happen. So Parkinson's is a progressive neurodegenerative disease. There's no cure for Parkinson's. It's a gradual, irreversible process of changes to the way the brain sends signals to the body. And specifically the production of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in our brain, which helps help send messages along their way within the brain. But as Parkinson's progresses, the parts of the brain that produce dopamine become impaired. So it becomes more difficult to send some of those messages out to your body smoothly. There are related conditions like Parkinsonism or progressive supranuclear palsy, which present in a very similar way to traditional Parkinson's. So people who experience these conditions can also benefit from speech therapy to work on the same types of issues, speech and swallowing. But as many of you know, Parkinson's can affect lots of different areas. Mobility, so walking or your gait often becomes affected. Speech, which is the main topic of our presentation today, swallowing, and cognition can become impacted too. But all of these symptoms can be managed with medication prescribed by your neurologist or movement disorder specialist, and also behavioral treatment, which is where I come in, as well as physical therapists. Physical therapists can help with balance and walking. Speech therapists help with voice, speaking, swallowing. A little bit more on the nuts and bolts of why this happens, and then we'll talk more about therapy and how we address it in therapy. So there's a big difference in our brain between how we process automatic behaviors and intentional behaviors. Parkinson's affects automatic behaviors. Things like swinging your arms while you walk, writing. Oftentimes in Parkinson's, the writing becomes more small and cramped. Speaking when you're not really thinking about it. So just answering someone off the cuff in conversation is generally a pretty automatic thing. We don't think much about our volume and how we pronounce the words. So these automatic behaviors start to become affected in Parkinson's. However, intentional behaviors, things you do on purpose, very deliberately, remain relatively intact or unaffected because they follow a slightly different pathway through the brain. And so those two pathways are down below on this slide. The extrapyramidal system, which is used for the automatic behaviors, versus the pyramidal system for intentional behaviors. Now, the extrapyramidal system, it's kind of like a country road with many stops along the way. It follows a kind of a long and complicated route through the brain, bouncing signals off of different structures within the brain, and requiring a lot of dopamine to send that message along throughout the brain. And since dopamine is affected in Parkinson's, this automatic kind of behavior can start to be dampened or softened or reduced, leading to a soft voice, low volume, or a shuffling gait, those kinds of things. However, if we can use the pyramidal system, which is used for intentional behavior, it's like we're getting on the expressway and bypassing all of those extra stops. So you can send these messages to the brain or through the brain with less dopamine, and therefore these behaviors are less affected by Parkinson's. So what can you do if you're struggling with the automatic behavior? The answer is to learn to live with intent. That's kind of the theme word for the kind of therapy that I do, is living and speaking with intent. So to speak with intent means to be very purposeful, very deliberate in the way you're speaking. It's not an automatic behavior. Requires focus, requires determination. So the role of speech therapy in Parkinson's is to help convert speech, which is often an automatic process, into a more intentional, purposeful act, and to practice doing that in lots of different situations so it becomes easier out in the real world to live and speak with intent. A good example of the difference between automatic versus intentional speech is counting. I know I can't hear most of you right now, but if you try counting from 1 to 10 without thinking about it very much, give it a shot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Versus try a countdown. Try a countdown from 10 to 1 and see the difference. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have to think about it more. You have to be a little more deliberate. And oftentimes this can be a neat little trick to try in a therapy evaluation and see you're a good candidate for this kind of therapy, because when you speak with intent, you have a stronger voice. So if you have Parkinson's, if you're experiencing hypophonia or a weak voice, talk to your neurologist or your movement disorder specialist. Discuss any symptoms you're experiencing. Explore medications with your neurologist to help manage those symptoms, but also ask them if you could benefit from physical or speech therapy for some behavioral treatment. So this is what I spend most of my time doing when I work with my Parkinson's patients. This is the Speak Out Therapy program. This is a program put together by the Parkinson Voice Project, which is a nonprofit organization based in Richardson, Texas. It's a great program. I encourage any of you who are unfamiliar with it to Google them, look them up. They've got a good website with all sorts of valuable information about Parkinson's and therapy for Parkinson's. But since 1999, they've been offering this standardized therapy program to treat hypophonia, voice issues in individuals with Parkinson's disease. They will provide you with a therapy workbook like this one, free of cost. And there's lots of additional resources and programs that you can find on their website. So in therapy, you will be using one of these workbooks and following along with the exercises at home, in addition to coming in to work with me or another speech therapist regularly for usually a period of about 6 weeks. The first step is an evaluation completed with a speech therapist on referral from a neurologist, where we will kind of get a baseline of how your voice is at that first meeting, and also try to determine how responsive you are to some of the therapy techniques we'll use. Then we'll get you set up with a workbook. You'll order the workbook and wait a week or two to receive a copy, and then we'll get started with therapy. In the meantime, you can check out the Parkinson's information sessions on their website, which tell you all sorts of good information similar to what I'm sharing with you today. And then we would do the Speak Out therapy program. I'll explain that on our next slide. But after the completion of the Speak Out program, it's a good idea to have a 6-week follow-up about a month and a half after completion of therapy to make sure your exercises are still going well, because there is a little independent maintenance required after therapy. And then we encourage all of our Speak Out graduates to check out the Loud Crowd, which is a really wonderful group format approach to the same kind of therapy. So let's take a few minutes to give you a demo of what you do in Speak Out therapy. There are 6 components to each lesson here on the left side of your screen, and I'm about to give you a demo of a few of them. But over on the right side, typically we would schedule 12 sessions in all. I like to schedule these about 2 times per week, although this is flexible depending on your schedule. We've gone as little as 1 session per week or as much as 3 sessions per week, but 2 seems to be a nice middle of the road. And at that frequency, we can complete the program in 6 weeks. It is a pretty rigorous program while you're involved in it, but that rigor is what really pays dividends and helps you speak with intent more often. While you're doing the therapy, you'll be completing a lesson from the workbook 2 times per day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and you can check them off as you go through the workbook. It should only take you about 15 minutes to do 1 lesson. But then when you come in to meet with me or a speech therapist, we'll spend about 40 to 50 minutes together and we'll go through a lesson together. So let me show you now a little preview of what Speak Out looks like. I'm going to pause my presentation and share a screen with you from the workbook. One moment. Let's see here. I usually use Zoom rather than Teams, so bear with me as I switch my screen here.
Hey Wes, are you going to want them to do any exercises during this?
I think that would definitely be entertaining for everyone if it would work for our recording format.
Or they can stay muted. That's another thing. That way they, some may feel more comfortable being muted so they can actually really use their diaphragm in this as well. It's a thought.
I think that's a great idea, Teresa. So let's do it this way. Everyone, don't change your settings. Just keep your screen off and your volume muted. But dude, please try to follow along with me and use a nice, loud, strong voice at home. So let me share my screen with you one more time, and we'll go over here, I believe.
No, don't do anything.
One moment, and okay. Sorry, folks, technical difficulties. Okay, so hopefully you're looking at a screen that says Lesson 6, Speak Out Workbook. All right, so I'm going to give you a demonstration of the first 3 exercises in the Speak Out program. We'll start with the warm-up exercise. So I'll give a demonstration of this the first time, and then I'll do it a second time, and I want you to join in with me on the second time. When we practice Speak Out, they give you volume targets. So 85 to 90 decibels is a pretty high volume level. I can show you tools if we're doing therapy to measure your volume at home, but for now, just give it your best effort. So I'll demonstrate the first exercise. May, me, my, mo, moo. It can look a little bit silly, but it's a great way to warm up the voice and practice using a strong, intentional voice. Things I try to do are stretch each sound out, use a strong voice all the way through from start to finish. Imagine that you're on stage in an auditorium and you're trying to project your voice to the very back row. So let's do that one more time, and from home I want you to use your own strong voice and join in with me. Here we go. May, my, mo, moo. Good work, everyone. I heard some of you, and you sounded good.
Hey, if we could take a quick second, if you don't mind, Wes. We have a couple people raising their hands. I'm wondering if we have some questions. Anita and Bill, do you have a question?
Thank you.
No, I just trying to clear up. I got this bar that's running across, and so I accidentally must raise my hand.
Good, no worries. Hey, Bobby, what about you? You've got your hand raised. She's just probably saying hi. Who knows?
Okay, no problem. Thanks for catching those raised hands.
Thank you.
All right, I want to show you 2 more exercises from this page, and then we'll move on. So exercise number 2 is a long ah. Again, we're using a loud decibel level, a loud volume. For your reference, normal conversational volume is between 70 and 80 decibels. So when it says 85 to 90 decibels, it's definitely a louder than normal voice. So I'll just go ahead and start now, and feel free to join in at home on a long, we're going to go for 10 seconds, long, loud, ah, like this. Ah. The goal with this exercise is to use the same strong, intentional voice from start to finish without trailing off, and to use a good quality voice. At the end of the day, I'm less concerned about 10 seconds. If you can only go for 6 seconds, that's great. Just give it your best shot. I'm more concerned with using good intent all the way through. So the ah is exercise number 2. It's an important one. And then the third exercise is the glide exercise. It's important to practice using your voice at different pitches, from a low to a high pitch, because that way we can use a strong voice up and down the pitch range and bring that interest and variety to our voices. So this one looks like this. I'll demonstrate and then I'll do it a couple more times for you to join in from home. So from low to high, and you pause, catch your breath. And glide back down to a low pitch. I'll do that 2 more times and join in with me from home. And one more time. That's all there is to the pitch glide. So we're going to skip the next 2 parts, but I'll show you briefly. We usually do some counting, so you count different numerals. This changes each week in the therapy program, but counting, again, is good practice for your intentional voice. There's always a reading component to each lesson. So this is pretty early in the workbook. This is lesson number 6. So at this stage, we're on single sentences. You practice reading the sentences on these pages with a strong, intentional voice, 75 to 85 decibels in this case, a little louder than normal volume. It's good practice. By the end of the program, you're reading much longer material, a full page or multiple page passage. So it does get more challenging as you progress through the weeks. And then finally, there's a cognitive exercise as the final component to each session. This also changes each week, and there's lots of different tasks, but this is often the most challenging one because you have to think about what it is you want to say while still saying it with intent. So you can try to join in with this one from home. I'll give you a demonstration of the first 2 or 3 lines. But on this exercise, you have to read the words on the left-hand side with lots of intent. Apples, oranges, pears. Then they want you to state the category, fruit, and name 3 more items that belong in the category, still using intent. So strawberries, plums, grapes. Or we could do it with the next one, hammer, shovel, nail. Category is tools, screwdriver, wrench, pliers, or whatever answers you come up with. This can be kind of fun to do with a partner sometimes, or it can definitely be entertaining in the group format when we do our loud crowd. Other things we do in, let me take this off the screen, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Other things we do in the loud crowd, we get kind of fancy with our cognitive exercises. So we'll play games, play Jeopardy, categories, things like that. It can be really fun in the group format. So I'm going to move to the next page. I just have 2 more slides, I think, for you. So after you've completed Speak Out Therapy, you have worked through all of the 25 lessons in this workbook, either with a speech therapist or also during your home practice. and that process usually takes about 6 weeks. About 6 weeks after therapy, it's a good idea to schedule a single follow-up session with your speech therapist to check in and make sure your home practice is still going well. At that time, we might make some suggestions or tweaks or recommend that you join the loud crowd. But whether or not you choose to join the loud crowd, following Speak Out therapy, we recommend a maintenance protocol where you continue the exercises 1 time per day. So you don't have to do it as rigorous as before, no 2 time per day practice, but continue practicing once per day indefinitely using your workbook or using other materials which are available online. The Parkinson Voice Project website offers, well, they have a Facebook page where they post new videos every weekday. So there's constantly new lessons that you can keep up with and stay entertained. And then we encourage patients to return to speech therapy as needed for a refresher course as often as every 6 months. Oftentimes, I won't see a patient again for 1 or 2 or more years after they complete the program. But other times, we can check back in as often as every 6 months or so to give you more practice with the exercises. After individual therapy, there's the loud crowd groups, which we've talked about, but these groups meet once a week. Currently, they're meeting virtually due to COVID. Everybody who participates in the loud crowd has already completed Speak Out therapy, so everyone should be familiar with the exercises, and we can focus on a fun, relaxed, interactive group format. And lastly, the Parkinson Voice Project also offers a few other programs that you could do directly through them, such as a virtual choir. Last year, they put on a global choir performance where people recorded themselves singing, and they pieced all of these videos together into a full choir experience. It was very cool. There's a little bit about the offerings for Loud Crowd here at Providence. This is a stock photo I found on the internet. These are not our group members, but this is kind of what it looks like these days when we do the virtual therapy. We have 2 groups in the Oregon region. One meets on Mondays at 10 a.m., the other on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Each group is between about 6 and 12 participants, and it's led by a speech therapist. I lead the Monday group every other 6 weeks. There is a cost associated with the class. It's $90 for a 6-week series. However, if you have Providence Health Plan Medicare, you receive an annual credit, which you can use to pay for those classes. And just based on feedback from our current loud crowd, everybody seems to like the virtual format. So the plan is to continue doing this over Zoom indefinitely, although moving forward post-COVID, we might try to have some occasional in-person gatherings, parties, if you will, every few months. And that's my presentation. Here are a few resources I thought I'd leave up on the page while I answer any questions, or I can take this away and we can look at each other. Here's the website for Parkinson Voice Project. Providence Movement Disorder Center is a good place to connect with a neurologist if you don't already have one. Your neurologist can give you a referral for speech therapy if you feel you would benefit from it. And this is my contact info. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Wes. You know what I think I'll do, so people can ask questions and bring their cameras back on. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here.
Great.
And I'll try and take good notes with the questions that come up. So then that way everybody can not feel so isolated. Okay.